The Galactic Coliseum stood as a monument to the art of combat. Located on the neutral planet of Altar Prime, it drew warriors from every corner of the galaxy. Here they came to prove their mettle, challenge their limits, and entertain the masses who reveled in the spectacle of blood and glory. Today the arena buzzed with excitement, for the participants of the annual Grand Melee had been announced. Among them stood a human, an anomaly amidst the towering brutes, scaled behemoths and multi-limbed terrors. The human, whose name was Elias Ward, had already become the talk of the event, though not for any good reason. The other warriors regarded him with a mixture of pity and amusement. He was short by galactic standards, barely scraping 2 meters. His physique, though muscular for a human, was laughably inadequate compared to the hulking physiques of the Velgaroth or the exoskeletal might of the Churith. To them he was a lamb among lions and his presence was a joke at best. Elias, however, remained calm amidst the jeers. His plain black uniform bore no insignias, no decorations of conquest or glory, unlike the ostentatious armor of his competitors. A single weapon hung at his side, a sword, simple and unadorned. Its scabbard, made of worn leather, was unremarkable compared to the plasma halberds, electro-whips and graviton axes wielded by the others. Yet, despite the sneers and snickers, Elias moved with a quiet confidence, as though the cacophony of ridicule was little more than a passing breeze. "Is this a joke?" rumbled Grothax, a massive Velgaroth warrior with 4 arms and skin like molten rock. He leaned down, his glowing amber eyes narrowing at Elias. Did the humans run out of soldiers and send a farmer instead? Laughter erupted from the crowd of warriors. Even the Churith, known for their stoicism, let out a clicking chuckle. Elias simply looked up at Grothax and offered a faint smile. "Perhaps you'll find out soon enough," Elias said, his voice even and unbothered. Grothax snarled, his jagged teeth bared. "Careful, little man. Your words might be the only weapons you have." The arena's announcer, a hovering AI with a voice that boomed across the stands, interrupted the exchange. "Warriors, prepare yourselves. The Grand Melee begins in 5 minutes." The crowd roared with anticipation, the sound shaking the very ground beneath their feet. The warriors dispersed, heading to their designated zones. Elias remained where he was, drawing his sword slightly from its scabbard to inspect the blade. It was clean, polished to a mirror sheen, and yet it seemed to radiate an aura of something. Something unplaceable but undeniably ominous. In the stands, the spectators buzzed with curiosity about the human. Most were there to see him humiliated, to watch him be crushed under the might of true warriors. But a few, particularly those who had heard of humanity's reputation as Deathworlders, were less certain. Humans, after all, came from Earth, a planet deemed inhospitable by galactic standards, where danger lurked in every shadow, and survival demanded more than just strength. One such spectator was Admiral Calyx, a seasoned strategist of the Zalvaran Empire. He leaned forward, his many eyes fixed on Elias. "They laugh now," he murmured to his companion, "but I wonder how long that will last." The Grand Melee was no ordinary battle. It was a free-for-all, a chaotic clash where alliances were fleeting, and every warrior fought for their survival. The last combatant standing would be declared the victor and immortalized in the annals of galactic history. The arena itself was a dynamic battlefield, filled with shifting terrain, traps, and obstacles designed to challenge even the most skilled fighters. As the countdown began, Elias closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. He could feel the weight of his sword, the familiar grip of its hilt. It was an old weapon, passed down through generations of his family, forged from Earth's strongest alloys. But it wasn't the sword that gave him confidence. It was what he carried within, the unyielding spirit of humanity, honed by centuries of struggle and resilience. The horn blared, signaling the start of the melee. Chaos erupted instantly. Grothax charged forward, his 4 arms swinging massive axes that cleaved through anyone in his path. A Churith warrior leaped onto the elevated platforms, firing plasma bolts with precision. Meanwhile, a serpentine Zenthari used its coils to crush an unfortunate competitor, its fanged maw dripping with venom. Elias, however, did not charge into the fray. He moved deliberately, observing the battlefield with sharp, calculating eyes. His movements were fluid, almost graceful, as he avoided skirmishes and kept to the shadows. He knew better than to waste energy in the opening chaos. Let the others exhaust themselves. His time would come. But his restraint did not go unnoticed. From across the arena, Grothax spotted him and let out a bellowing laugh. "Hiding already, little man? Pathetic." Elias ignored him. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting. The first warrior to challenge Elias was a hulking Bralax, its crystalline body shimmering with deadly light. It towered over him, wielding a mace that crackled with energy. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see the human crushed in an instant. The Bralax swung its mace with devastating force. Elias sidestepped effortlessly, the weapon smashing into the ground and leaving a crater. Before the Bralax could recover, Elias stepped in close, his sword flashing in a precise arc. The blade struck a weak point in the Bralax's armor, severing a critical joint. The alien roared in pain, collapsing as its crystalline form fractured. The crowd fell silent, stunned by the display. Elias didn't pause to bask in their shock. He moved on, his expression calm, his blade ready for the next opponent. By the end of the first hour, the number of combatants had dwindled significantly. Elias had taken down 3 more warriors, each with surgical precision. His movements were efficient, almost clinical, and his opponents fell before they could comprehend his skill. In the stands, Admiral Calix couldn't suppress a grin. They underestimated him, he said. They thought strength alone would win the day. But humans are something else entirely. But Elias's greatest challenge was yet to come. Grothax, who had been watching the humans' progress with growing irritation, decided it was time to end this farce. The Velgaroth warrior stomped toward Elias, his axes gleaming. "Enough games, little man," he growled. "Let's see if that sword of yours can handle real power." Elias turned to face him, his expression unreadable. He raised his sword, the blade catching the light. "Come then," he said. "Let's find out." As the 2 warriors squared off, the arena grew deathly quiet. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The laughter was gone, replaced by an electric tension. For the first time, they began to wonder if the human might be more than he seemed. Elias tightened his grip on his sword, his heart steady. He wasn't fighting for glory or fame. He was fighting to prove a point the galaxy would never forget. Grothax's towering form cast a long shadow over Elias, but the human didn't flinch. The Velgaroth warrior's molten-like skin radiated heat, and his 4 arms flexed, each holding an axe brimming with energy. The crowd erupted in cheers for Grothax, their favorite to win, as the odds shifted heavily against the human. Elias, standing calm, rolled his shoulders and adjusted his grip on the sword. He didn't carry a shield, nor did he wear reinforced armor. He relied solely on his instincts, precision, and unparalleled focus. For all his calm demeanor, however, he knew Grothax was no fool. The Velgaroth were battle-hardened warriors, known for their unrelenting ferocity. This duel would test every skill Elias had honed over a lifetime. Grothax grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the arena's artificial light. "You've done well to make it this far, human. But now you'll see why the Velgaroth are unmatched in combat. I'll crush you like an insect." Elias tilted his head slightly, his expression neutral. "All that strength, all those weapons," he replied, his voice steady, "but let's see if you can keep up." The Velgaroth made the first move. Grothax surged forward with surprising speed for a being of his size, his axes swinging in a coordinated onslaught. The ground shook with each step, and the air hummed with the power of his weapons. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation, certain the human would be obliterated in a matter of seconds. Elias moved like a shadow. He sidestepped the first strike, ducked under the second, and twisted his body to avoid the third and fourth. Each dodge was impossibly precise, leaving Grothax's blows to carve deep gashes into the arena floor. Sparks and debris flew as the Velgaroth roared in frustration, his attacks growing more aggressive with every miss. But Elias wasn't merely dodging. He studied Grothax's movements, noting the subtle shifts in his stance, the arcs of his swings, and the delay between strikes from his left and right arms. He was reading his opponent, cataloging weaknesses with every passing second. Grothax snarled and brought all 4 axes down in a crushing overhead strike, aiming to pulverize Elias where he stood. The human darted forward at the last moment, slipping inside Grothax's guard. With a single, fluid motion, Elias slashed upward with his sword, the blade biting into Grothax's forearm and severing one of his weapons from his grip. The Velgaroth howled in pain and rage, staggering back as molten blood oozed from the wound. The crowd gasped, stunned by the audacity of the human's counterattack. "You're fast," Grothax growled, clutching his injured arm. "But speed won't save you forever." Elias said nothing. He merely adjusted his stance, his blade gleaming with Grothax's blood. The air around him seemed to shift, growing heavier with an unspoken tension. For the first time, Grothax hesitated. The duel continued, with Grothax unleashing a relentless barrage of strikes. Yet no matter how powerful or unpredictable his attacks became, Elias remained one step ahead. He moved like water, flowing around each blow and retaliating with surgical precision. His sword struck weak points in Grothax's armor, inflicting small but accumulating wounds that began to slow the Vel'Garath's movements. In the stands, Admiral Calix watched with growing admiration. "He's not just fighting," the Zalvran strategist murmured. "He's dismantling him. Every move, every strike, it's all part of a larger plan." By now, the crowd's jeers had turned to murmurs of astonishment. The human, who had been mocked and ridiculed, was holding his own against one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. And with each passing moment, it became clear that Elias was not merely surviving, he was winning. Grothax, battered and bleeding, let out a deafening roar. His molten eyes burned with fury as he activated the secondary systems in his axes. The weapons crackled with enhanced energy, their glow intensifying to a blinding white. "You've pushed me far enough, human," he bellowed. "No more games." The Vel'Garath charged, his axes leaving trails of searing light in their wake. The arena floor cracked and sizzled beneath his feet, and the very air seemed to vibrate with the force of his assault. Grothax was a juggernaut, and the crowd roared as they sensed the end approaching. But Elias didn't flinch. As Grothax closed the distance, Elias raised his sword in a two-handed grip. The blade, seemingly mundane moments ago, began to hum softly. A faint glow emanated from its edge, growing brighter with each passing second. The collision was inevitable. Grothax brought all his remaining strength into a single devastating swing, his axes descending like falling stars. Elias, calm and focused, stepped into the strike. His sword flashed in a brilliant arc, meeting Grothax's weapons head-on. The impact unleashed a shockwave that rippled through the arena, silencing the crowd and throwing nearby combatants off their feet. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as the two warriors stood locked in place. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, Grothax's axes splintered apart. The energy coursing through them exploded outward, sending the Vel'Garath sprawling to the ground. Elias stood over him, his sword still glowing faintly and scathed. Grothax struggled to rise, his massive frame trembling from the effort. His molten blood pooled around him, and his breaths came in ragged gasps. Yet even in defeat he managed a low, rumbling chuckle. You're not just a warrior," he said, his voice filled with grudging respect. "You're something else entirely." Elias lowered his sword, the glow fading as he sheathed it. "I'm human," he replied simply. "That's all I need to be." The crowd erupted into deafening cheers, their earlier mockery forgotten. For the first time, they had witnessed the full measure of a Deathworlder's resolve, skill and indomitable spirit. Elias turned and walked away, leaving Grothax to be carried off by the arena medics. He didn't raise his arms in victory or bask in the adulation of the crowd. For him, this was never about proving his worth to others. It was about showing them what humanity was capable of, why they should never be underestimated. In the stands, Admiral Calix leaned back, a satisfied smile on his face. "They thought him a joke," he said to no one in particular. "But now they'll think twice before laughing at a human AG." The atmosphere in the arena had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a spectacle of ridicule aimed at a lone human warrior was now a battlefield charged with tension. Elias stood in the center, calm and focused, while Grothax, the Vel'Garath Titan, struggled to contain the damage he had already sustained. The once cocky crowd now watched in stunned silence, their disbelief slowly transforming into unease. Grothax, for all his injuries, wasn't finished. The Vel'Garath were known for their durability and unyielding resolve in combat. Rising to his full height, his molten eyes narrowed as he studied Elias. The human wasn't even sweating, his breathing steady, his movements as precise as ever. The longer the fight went on, the more it seemed Elias was conserving energy, waiting. "You think you've won, don't you?" Grothax growled, his voice strained but no less menacing. "You think you can break me with your little blade? Let me show you what it means to be a warrior." He slammed his remaining fist into the ground, activating the arena's environmental modifiers. The air around them shimmered as the battlefield transformed. The flat arena floor gave way to jagged volcanic terrain, with streams of lava cutting through the rock. Pillars of smoke rose into the air, obscuring visibility. The heat was oppressive, the kind of environment that would overwhelm most species in minutes. Elias squinted against the sudden glare of the molten rivers. The temperature soared, beads of sweat forming on his brow, but he didn't move from his spot. Instead, he closed his eyes briefly as if recalibrating. When he opened them, there was a sharpness there, a clarity that seemed unshakable. Grothax wasted no time. With a roar, he charged again, his massive frame barreling through the volcanic landscape like a living avalanche. The terrain worked to his advantage, his natural heat resistance allowing him to traverse the lava flows with ease. His fists glowed with energy, the remnants of his shattered axes now turned into molten gauntlets. Elias waited until the last possible moment before moving. He darted to the side, his feet barely touching the uneven ground as he navigated the treacherous terrain. Grothax swung wildly, his massive fists carving through the air with enough force to shatter stone. Elias evaded each strike, his movements fluid and deliberate. But Grothax wasn't just attacking blindly. He was forcing Elias into a corner, cutting off his escape routes with each swing. Lava pooled around them and the smoke grew thicker, choking the air. The Velgaroth grinned, sensing victory. "Nowhere to run, little human," he snarled, raising a molten fist for the finishing blow. Elias didn't run. Instead, he turned and sprinted toward Grothax, closing the distance between them. The sudden move caught the Velgaroth off guard. Elias slid under Grothax's swing, coming to a stop just behind him. With a swift, calculated strike, Elias slashed at the back of Grothax's leg. The blade cut through the thick hide and muscle, sending the giant crashing to one knee. The crowd gasped as Grothax bellowed in pain, his massive form teetering on the edge of the lava flow. Elias didn't press the attack. He stepped back, watching as Grothax struggled to regain his footing. "You're strong," Elias said, his voice carrying over the roar of the lava. "Stronger than most. But strength alone won't win you this fight." Grothax turned, his molten eyes blazing with fury. "You talk too much, human," he roared, lunging at Elias with all his remaining strength. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as the Velgaroth's massive frame surged forward. Elias met him head-on, his sword flashing in the fiery light. Their clash sent shockwaves rippling through the arena, the sound of steel against molten flesh echoing like thunder. Grothax's gauntlets smashed into the ground where Elias had been moments before, leaving craters in their wake. But Elias was always one step ahead, his movements precise and deliberate. The human warrior wasn't just fighting, he was controlling the battlefield. Every strike, every dodge, every step was calculated to wear Grothax down. The Velgaroth's attacks grew slower, his movements more labored. The oppressive heat of the arena, once his ally, was now draining his energy. Elias, on the other hand, seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. His sword strikes became sharper, more aggressive. The blade moved like a living thing, slicing through Grothax's defenses with ease. It was clear to everyone watching, the human wasn't just surviving, he was dominating. The turning point came when Elias feinted to the left, drawing Grothax's remaining arm into a wide swing. As the Velgaroth overcommit, Elias darted to the right, his blade flashing upward. The strike severed Grothax's gauntlet, sending molten shards scattering across the arena. Grothax staggered back, his massive frame swaying. He dropped to one knee, his breathing ragged, his molten blood pooling around him. The once mighty warrior was beaten, his strength spent, his weapons destroyed. Elias approached slowly, his sword held at his side. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their earlier jeers and laughter replaced by awe. For the first time, they truly understood what it meant to face a Deathworlder, a being forged in the crucible of one of the most hostile planets in the galaxy. "You fought well," Elias said, his voice calm but firm. "But this fight is over." Grothax looked up at him, his molten eyes filled with a mixture of rage and respect. You are no ordinary warrior," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You are something else?" Elias nodded. "I'm human," he replied simply. "And that's all I need to be." The arena erupted into cheers, the crowd finally recognizing the skill and determination of the human warrior. Elias sheathed his sword and turned, walking away from the fallen Velgaroth. The fight was over, but the message was clear: humanity was not to be underestimated. In the stands, Admiral Calix leaned back, a satisfied smile on his face. "They thought him a joke," he said to no one in particular. "But now they know. Humans are no laughing matter." The arena stood in utter silence as Elias walked away from the crumpled form of Grothax. The Velgaroth Titan, once the crowd's favorite to crush the human challenger, now lay beaten on the scorched volcanic ground. Steam hissed as molten blood met the cooling field around the arena. The transformation of the audience was complete. Gone was the mocking laughter, replaced by wide-eyed reverence. Admiral Calix rose from his seat in the VIP section, his reptilian gaze fixed on Elias. The old Yaverick warrior had seen countless battles, had watched champions rise and fall across the centuries, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight, it was a message. Elias, now standing at the edge of the arena, looked up at the admiral. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a challenge, a silent demand for acknowledgement, for respect. The alien dignitaries, military leaders, and warriors who had gathered to witness humanity's humiliation now found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about the Deathworlders from Earth. Grothax's deep, rumbling voice shattered the silence. Wait. The crowd gasped as the defeated Velgaroth rose slowly to his feet, his massive frame trembling under its own weight. He towered over Elias, though now his stance was no longer menacing. His molten eyes no longer burned with fury but instead gleamed with an emotion rarely seen from a warrior of his kind: respect. You have bested me, Grothax said, his voice carrying across the arena. No Velgaroth has fallen to an outsider in combat for over a century. Yet here I stand, humbled by a human. Elias tilted his head slightly, meeting Grothax's gaze. You fought with honor, he said simply. That's all any warrior can do. Grothax nodded and then, to the astonishment of all present, knelt. His immense bulk bowed before the human, his molten gauntlet striking the ground in a gesture of submission. You are not just a warrior. You are a Deathworlder, and you have earned my respect. Any who challenge humanity will now face the strength I have witnessed today. The ripple effect was immediate. The alien representatives from dozens of species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't just about Elias anymore. This was a declaration. If a Velgaroth, the most feared warrior species in the galaxy, could be humbled by a human, what did that mean for the rest of them? Admiral Calix descended from his seat and entered the arena, his crimson cape billowing behind him. The crowd parted in deference as he approached Elias and Grothax. The Yaverick leaders' piercing eyes locked onto Elias, and for a moment, the human and the alien stared at each other in silence. Human, Calix said finally, his voice low and measured. You have proven today that your kind is not to be dismissed. This victory is not just yours, it belongs to your entire species. You have reminded us all why Deathworlders are a force to be reckoned with. Elias remained silent, his expression unreadable. Calix's words were a double-edged sword, both a recognition of human strength and a warning of the threat it posed. But, Calix continued, his voice growing louder, with such strength comes responsibility. The galaxy watches you now. They will fear you, but fear can turn to hatred. Remember this, Deathworlder. The line between respect and fear is thin. Tread it wisely. Elias nodded, understanding the weight of the words. We didn't come here to dominate, he replied. We came to prove that humanity has a place among the stars. If fear is the price of that, so be it. But we would prefer respect. Calix studied him for a moment longer before giving a curt nod. You've earned mine, he said, turning to address the crowd. Let it be known throughout the galaxy, humanity is not to be trifled with. Let this day mark the beginning of a new era, one where Deathworlders walk among us not as savages but as equals. The declaration sent shockwaves across the galactic community. News of the duel spread rapidly, reaching every corner of the universe. Footage of Elias's fight with Grothax was replayed endlessly, analyzed by military strategists, cultural historians, and everyday citizens alike. For humanity, the duel became a symbol of their resilience and ingenuity, a reminder that their status as Deathworlders was not a curse but a badge of honor. On Earth, Elias became a hero overnight, his name synonymous with human determination. For Elias, though, the fight was just one step in a much larger journey. As he stood in the now empty arena, the roar of the crowd replaced by silence, he thought about the road ahead. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, but with that place came new challenges, new responsibilities. He glanced down at his sword, its edge still gleaming despite the battle. It was a tool of war, yes, but also a symbol of balance, a reminder that power must be wielded wisely. Let them come, he muttered to himself, sheathing the blade. We'll show them what it means to be human. With that, Elias walked away from the arena, leaving behind the shattered remains of the fight and stepping into a future that was brighter and more uncertain than ever before. The galaxy had learned a hard truth. Humanity was not just another species. They were Deathworlders, born of fire and struggle, and they would not be ignored.